Hi Stampers and crafty friends, welcome to Del Bello's Designs. My name is Catherine and today we're going to be making this card that I am calling Tilly and Tango's Starry Night. Hey, I'm excited to share this with you today. I've gone ahead and pre-cut some cardstock. I have a piece of multifarious cardstock that I have cut down to 4 by 5¼ inches, and then I'll be matting it with a piece of heavyweight black cardstock, which is cut to 4 3/8 by 5 7/8 of an inch. Let's go ahead and go over some of the other supplies we'll be needing. Something that I've been finding challenging this week is losing my mouse, so I've gone ahead and put them in this container, and I don't want to lose them when we're doing this video, so I'm going to show you what I've made and then put them right back in. So I have gone ahead and cut out, or pre-stamped and cut out, just a mask for Tilly and Tango. We'll also be using our Druid's Pass, so I had stamped that on a piece of copy paper and cut it out because we're going to be needing to mask that. And I also have gone ahead and created a moon mask from a piece of acetate. So I have the piece I've cut out and the outside of the mask. So we're going to be using both of those. And I'm just going to go ahead and put them right back away in my little container so they don't get misplaced. All right, let's talk about the stamps we're going to be using today. We'll be using the Druid's Pass, which is LAV 870. We'll be using Tilly and Tango, LAV 726, and we'll also be using the Vine Branch, which is LAV 811. So we only are going to be using 3 stamps tonight. All right, in addition to that, I have the new Lavinia acrylic chalk paints, and we'll be creating our moon with this. I am using the vanilla custard and the water lily, and if you don't have the Lavinia acrylic paint, you can certainly use watercolor pencils or any other acrylic paints that you have at home. I just happen to have gotten these in this past week and I wanted to try them out, and they came out, made a really cute little moon for us there tonight. All right, let's talk about the inks that we'll be using. We're only going to be using 4 ink pads. So I have the VersaFine Clear and Nocturne, VersaFine Clear and Twilight. I also will be using Elements ink with the dark denim and the blue atoll for our background. Along with that, I'll be using a couple of watercolor paint brushes. So I have this medium-sized brush and then a small detail brush to help us make that moon. I also have my blending brushes. I have one for my blue atoll and one for the dark denim. And then I have one of these fine detail brushes to add a little bit of shading underneath the bridge when we come to that. All right, I also am going to be using the water to thin down my acrylic paints. And in addition to all of that, I have a variety of pens that we'll be using. So just this week, I also received the Sweet Poppy watercolor fine tip brush pens, and I went and ordered set 2. So I'm going to be using this gray to color in the Druid's Pass, and this is just one of the watercolor brushes that come in the set. In case we need that, I want to have it on hand. I'll be using my Wink of Stella, my light blue Posca pen in glitter. I have a Posca pen in white. I have my chalk pastel in white to add highlights to my mouse and perhaps the bridge. I have gone ahead and grabbed my watercolor pencil, and this is a dark blue purplish color that we'll be using to outline the moon. We'll also be using our Uniball Signo gel pen in white. And as always, I have my Micron pen on hand in case I need to touch up any ink spots that have not stamped correctly. In addition to all that, you'll want to have a few pieces of paper towel to suck up the ink off the moon when we get to that point and to brush off our pens with. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to begin with the blue atoll, and I am going to add some color to the top half of my card, and then we'll be following that with the dark denim, mostly on the bottom half and then around the edges in the top. So I'm going to speed that up because I'm sure you don't want to sit here all night and watch me blend a background. All right, I feel as though I always worry about these smudges, and I don't know why, because I know that we're going to come back in and we're going to be just fine covering them up. So let's come back in with the dark denim. We'll cover up most of those, and what we don't cover up with the background blending, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to be able to cover up with my stamps as we move along. So I'm going to be working with the dark denim, and I'm going to come in and add a layer at the bottom, and then, as I said previously, around the edges and the top. All right, the next step is to mask off that moon, and I'm going to put it up here in the right corner. That looks like a good spot to me. I'm going to come back in with my water and my paper towel and really get that brush nice and wet. Oh, looks like we have a little bit of purple left still in there. I'm going to get this watercolor brush nice and wet, and I'm going to come in and I'm just going to brush some water over the ink where I want this moon to be, and I'm going to come back right away with a paper towel and wipe it up, and you'll see how it just bleaches out those element inks so nicely on this multifarious cardstock. And it's okay to have a little bit left in there because that will just help us with some of the details on the moon when we get to it in a little bit. And I'm going to give that a minute to dry. It will dry pretty quickly. And I might need that mask again, so I'm going to make sure I put it back in that container and don't lose it. And the next step is going to be to stamp the Druid's Past. I'm going to stamp this with the Nocturne VersaFine Clair. ink that up really well. And wipe off that little smudge right there. And then I see that I have a little bit of smudges when I was blending the background, so I'm going to try to place my bridge over those and see if we can cover that up a little bit with our stamping. So we'll hold that down and give that ink a chance to soak into the paper. Right, and I'm happy with how that came out. So I'm going to clean it off and put it away. We won't be using that again. All right, the next step is to use our Sweet Poppy watercolor brush pen. And if you've never tried these before, they're very similar to the Zig pens. They are called markers, but the tip of it is just like a paintbrush, which is very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and color in that bridge with the gray. It is a paint, so I don't have to worry too much because it's going to blend in, so it doesn't have to be perfectly painted. The nice thing about these pens is you can really paint with them and you don't have to worry about breaking the nib because it's not a nib, it's a brush. I'm really having fun with these this weekend. Okay. I am going to come back in with the blending brush that comes with the set of pens, and I haven't filled it with water, so I'm just going to dip it into my water here. I'll just blend that in a little bit. It looks like I bleached out a little spot right there, so I'm just going to go back in and touch it up. And not worry too much about the other spots that might be a little bleached out because they're just going to add highlights from the moonlight. Next up, I'm going to use the chalk paints. So we'll start with the vanilla custard, and we're just going to need a little drop of it. I like to just put it on my stamp block because it wipes right off when I'm finished. And let me add a little bit of water to it. We're going to water it down to thin it out a bit. These are really great for stamping on and really versatile. So if you haven't tried them yet, you should definitely pick yourself up some of these paints. And if you don't have them, your watercolor pencils will work just fine to create your moon. You might have a moon stamp, or you could water down any acrylic paints that you have on hand. All right, these do dry pretty quickly, but I'm going to give it a few minutes to dry before we add some detail, and that will give me time to clean up. All right, while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to come back in with my small detail blending brush and my dark denim elements, and I want to add a little bit of shading and darkness under that bridge. I'm going to give that another moment to dry. All right, now that the white chalk paint is mostly dry on my moon, I think, I'm very inky today, I'm going to take out the water lily. And again, we just need a small bit of this. I'm going to put it on my ink block again, just because it's so easy to clean up, and water it down just a tad and get it ready to use. Now, when I'm making the moon with my acrylic paints, I do like to add the shadows in little spots and then mop it right up so it doesn't get too defined and it has more of an authentic, natural look. So I think I'm going to use this smaller pen and some clean paper towels. And I'll just pick up a little bit of this paint. And we have a smudge there. I'm going to try to cover that up. Give that a minute. Okay, we'll come back in and add a little bit more. All right, that's coming out a little more defined than I want it to, so I think I'm just going to come back in with a little bit more of the vanilla custard and see if we can wash some of that lavender out. I'm going to give that a moment to dry. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I'm going to clean up the paint. Right, now that our moon is done, let's go ahead and stamp our mice. So I really liked the way these looked when I had one of them reaching up into the moon. So I'm going to place him on my bridge so that just his little arm is hanging over into the moon. And then I'll place the other one alongside him on the bridge. Make sure your stamps are facing the right way. That could have been a disaster, but at least we noticed. And then I'm going to use my block to just come in and pick them up because they are perfectly aligned where I'm going to want to place them. And I'm inking that up in the VersaFine Nocturne. And just give him a little press and hold him down. Giving that oil-based ink a chance to soak into the background as well as the acrylic paint on the moon. The next thing we're going to do is mask off the bridge, the mice, and the moon, and use our Posca pen to create some stars in the sky. I've gone ahead and masked off the moon, the little mice, and the bridge. Now I'm going to use my Posca pen to add a little bit of splatter, and that'll give us a few stars in the sky. We can come back in after and add some by hand wherever we want them. Get it primed with lots of paint, and here we go. All right, we'll give that a minute to dry, and then we'll take those masks off. Dry. Now that this has had a chance to dry, it's time to stamp our vines. I'm going to be using the vine branch and stamping it in Twilight a couple times at the top and then once at the bottom. No need to ink up the whole stamp because we're only going to be using the branches at the very top. I'm going to frame the moon with my first impression. Okay. I'll do one more on the side. And then a third time with the nocturne down at the bottom. Right now I'm going to clean that off. And this time we're going to come back in with the nocturne and just add a couple more. There we go. I'm noticing an empty spot in the trees up here, so I think I'm going to come back and just add a few more pieces of this branch right to that corner at the top. And that's better. The rest of this card really is just about adding all of the details. So where to start? Let's come in with our chalk pastel pencil and add some highlights to the mice. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow under the mice with the Sweet Poppy watercolor pen in gray. And by adding a couple of layers, we can actually darken that up a bit. want to add a few highlights to the rocks on the bridge, so I'm going to come back in with my chalk pastel and just add a few extra little details to some of those rocks. We don't need a lot here, just a little bit is fine. Blend it in a bit, and maybe add some highlights to the trees. If you don't like the open branches on the stamp, you could come in and fill that in with a little bit of watercolor paint. Just darken up those vines a little bit. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of depth and detail to the moon, so I'm going to start with my purple watercolor pencil and just go around the outside of the moon, just to give it a little bit of an edge. And I'll blend that out a little bit with my chalk pastel pencil. And we're going to blend all of that out and add a little sparkle with the wink of Stella. Just adding a few blue orbs to some of the open space. And give it a little bit of extra sparkle. And this is also a good way to cover up any smudges or anomalies from the ink blending that we did early on. Looking for any open spaces that I can add some of these. And this, along with the moon, is about all the sparkle we're going to use on this card. I'm going to come back in and add a few more stars in the night sky. And last, I'm going to hand draw a few of the twinkling stars in the sky, maybe one here, and somewhere else. So let's see, get that pen moving. A little bit of a twinkle. I'm going to put one up here. All right, and there we go, start to finish. Hope you like it. Thanks for joining me.